What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. Recently I was fortunate enough to spend a bunch of days playing the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 beta on PC, like I'm sure a lot of you did, and I walked away with things that I liked, things that I didn't like, some mixed feelings, but definitely some thoughts that I wanted to bring in a video to the channel and discuss, as this is a game franchise as well as a game that I was and continue to be very interested in. And certainly when this launches later in October, it is a game that I'm sure would be very popular and something that viewers of this channel will be interested in jumping into. And so I thought I'd get my 5 cents onto the table. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the things that I liked, and then we'll move on to the things which I didn't like. But I think it's very important to preface this by saying that with a beta that is this late in terms of the space between when we actually get to play it and when the actual game comes out, means that a lot of the things, if in fact maybe all of the things that I might be discussing in this video from a liked as well as a disliked perspective, is probably what we're going to be stuck with or what we're going to see at launch. It however does not mean that these things cannot be improved or further deteriorate. That being said, first and foremost, when it comes to the engine of the game, I think it looks really phenomenal. It moves very well. I like the realism of it, the effects, the sounds, the water, all of that. This engine accomplishes a lot more than the Modern Warfare 2019 engine does. And it kind of goes without saying that these days, we do have steps in realism, steps in graphics and all that, and it's nice to see the amount of effort that they put into this. Moving to the map, everything has a realistic and lifelike side to it, and I actually really did enjoy the implementation of sound and everything this time around, which was obviously something that was an issue before in previous releases of this franchise. Now, the modes of play which we got to see in the beta was certainly more than I expected. Now, I don't necessarily think that this beta was for me per se, since the two primary modes which I enjoy so much in this franchise, namely Warzone and Plunder, were both missing from this package. There was an impressive amount of things that we actually could do here, from ground war and invasion. We had search and destroy and prisoner rescue and hard point, and there was certainly a whole bunch of different things that we could try here. And I really I enjoyed the fact that even halfway across the weekend they started bringing in search and destroy, so it really seemed like they wanted to get as many different modes in front of us to try as possible. However, I do kind of wish that I managed to get just a little bit of time in with Warzone, if that was possible. However, the modes that I did try were fantastic. I'm a huge fan of prisoner rescue. I played countless hours of it and I had a whole bunch of fun with it. It plays surprisingly deep strategically, depending on which side of the two you play from, an attacking perspective or a defending side. And if you have competent teammates, it can result in some really tense matches, and I actually enjoyed that quite a lot. Like I said, when the full game comes out, I'm sure most of my time will be circling around the Warzone area, but I'd be remiss if I didn't admit the fact that I'd probably come back to this, especially due to the fact that we don't get Warzone straight off the rip. It doesn't launch with the game when it launches at the end of October, but rather comes a little bit later in November, which means we would be playing some of these other modes to tide our time until such a time that we get to play Warzone in any case, because we'll be leveling up our weapons and all of that. And I'll definitely be doing that in search and destroy and prisoner rescue. Now, I also think that the map choice, and I'm sure that there are many other maps that are also coming with the full release of it, but the map choice that were on display here, whether that's them picking the strongest offerings, which is could likely be the case, was really good. I think they worked well with the modes that I mentioned, and while I didn't spend as much time with ground war and invasion, I was impressed by the sizes of those maps as well, because those are of course takes on a much bigger player count of 40 versus 40 or 64 versus 64, and so there sometimes the map design cannot not feel as tight and as good as we see with some of these 6v6 maps which are in the aforementioned modes. But still, I found that there was a lot of effort spent there, a lot of well done effort done there, and I think that's probably due to the fact that those maps are of course snippets or smaller versions of what we eventually see in the big map that becomes the Warzone map. And maybe that is why you can kind of appreciate the detail that's been put into that, because it's all part of a bigger picture. The other thing that impressed me, not necessarily something that I would be doing a lot or using a lot, is the third person mode. When I originally heard that this was something that was coming to the game, I thought that it was going to be kind of gimmicky, and it definitely isn't. Again, it's not a way that I would ever play the game, but it is implemented very well, and I'm sure it has a whole bunch of fans, people that will probably play it this way, and I'm glad that that kind of style of gameplay is catered for you, because again, it just means that you have more people that are playing this game and more people that are enjoying this package overall. Last but not least, I have to admit that I am super happy with the fact that the movement has changed in this game. And this is kind of like this is my last good point, my last thing that I liked a lot. So it's kind of like a little bit of good and a little bit of bad. But the slide canceling not being a thing anymore is pretty awesome. Yes, I know that there are workarounds, and they'll probably make some tweaks to make that less doable, or in the end it might be so strenuous to actually pull off. I've certainly seen some clips on TikTok of people explaining how to do slide canceling now with a controller, and it kind of seems like it's more effort than it's worth. But the bottom line is, I mean, whether that's because I'm a boomer gamer or something like that, I like the slightly slower, more methodic pace that we have within the game right now. Again, this can, of course, change when we go over to the Warzone modes, anything like that, because they could tweak the speeds in between these two modes and perhaps change that. Now, my reason for saying that this was a good and a bad point is that due to the fact that slide canceling isn't a thing anymore, and due to the fact that generally movement in this game does not necessarily translate into an advantage for you, whether that is sliding into combat or dolphin diving or anything like that, means that players are looking for ways in which they can gain the upper hand in any gunfight. And that means that something that I've definitely noticed, and this was far more prevalent in your normal 6v6 deathmatch than it was in like modes like prisoner rescue, for instance, for some reason, is that people have a tendency to bunny hop a lot, and that is still something that isn't really punished enough in this game, and I definitely think that is something that needs to be looked at. So with this slower methodical pace, which I enjoy as it's the kind of style that I like to play, unfortunately it does invite this sort of thing where players will engage combat by jumping around corners and all of that, and that's not necessarily my favorite way of playing either. And it kind of creates this situation where most of the times you just gauge that when you hear someone coming, they're going to come at you jumping, and you just aim high already to just take care of that. That then summarizing all the things which I enjoyed in the game, let's talk about the things which did not work that well and that I didn't enjoy overall. The first and foremost would be the UI, and I've already made a video specifically on this topic, so I'm not going to cover ground that I've already tread. The bottom line is I feel that it is extremely unintuitive, clunky as fuck. It is over designed, and it is just really confusing moving through all the menus and the sub menus. And furthermore, due to the fact that this is a game that is literally built for mass consumption, if I can put it that way, it's not a niche game of any kind. One would imagine that this would be the most simplistically designed, easy to navigate, you know, just 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons, you're in a game, you quickly launch into something, and that is definitely not the case here. This is a game that works on multiple different platforms and are played by serious gamers as well as super casuals. And again, what you want is you want the menus, you want the interface, you want all of that to speak a common language, a simple language, something that all of us can understand and can navigate and get to the actual meat and potatoes of the game as soon as possible. And that is simply not the case. The issue with this is, while this might be the thing that frustrates me the most about the game, it's also most likely the thing that we're just gonna have to shut the fuck up with and deal with, because this is hard designed into the game already, and it would be very amazing to me if we see massive changes to this design overall. Yeah, sure, they could maybe eliminate, create some, you know, shortcuts, some quick keys, anything like that, which would be great, but I think this might be the one that we might just have to, you know, shut up and take. Now, I'm also not sold, and feeding on from that, I'm just also not sold on the progression system that's built into Gunsmith 2.0. I definitely think Gunsmith 2.0 is good looking, and the detail that you get on the weapons and looking at it in the cases and the interface specifically around that and the aesthetic of it is really nice, but again, just very cumbersome to move through. And my issue is that while we were playing the beta, people have noticed that in earlier parts of the beta, like for instance the PlayStation only beta, the XP for weapons was a lot faster than what we saw over the weekend when it was the open beta to other platforms as well as, you know, like PC. This leads me to believe that obviously they opened up the throttle gates for XP in these betas because they wanted different weapons and more attachments in people's hands so people could experience, you know, a lot of different weapon variations in the beta and give them idea of different kinds of platforms, different kinds of weapons that they could engage with. Now, realistically, at the end of the month, when this game drops, we will get a much more throttled XP system. And what that then means is the exact thing about Gunsmith 2.0, which I don't enjoy, and that is the fact that you are locked into certain weapons that you have to level your way through to get to potential weapons that you want to actually play with. That will make that entire process just take that much shorter. And that's, I think, the thing that's going to probably end up frustrating people, possibly most people. Now, this could be a non-point, of course, if the fact that the XP is like it was at the beginning of the beta, or the fact that it really doesn't take that long to actually move through those different tiers to get to the ones that you want to get to. But that is something we're going to have to see in time. I certainly think that, you know, at least from a Call of Duty perspective, this isn't the case for all games of this kind, but it certainly has been for this franchise. It's always been that the leveling of weapons is a way for them to artificially increase the playtime that you spend with the game. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think that you should be able to level a weapon within a couple of hours and then you can actually use it. Forcing people to sit for days as they try to grind their way through, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 weapons to get to the submachine gun that they want is probably not the way that this should be done. Now, I mentioned ground war and invasion before, and something that I certainly did not like. I think the main difference really between these two is that with invasion mode, you actually have AI that's running around the map. I simply don't see the reason for this, because this AI is so retarded and stupid and unable to actually do anything, whether that is hitting players with actual fire or accomplishing objectives, that it just kind of feels that this is a mode that was thought out, but the AI, at least the intelligence or the effectiveness of the AI, was never really explored or never really pushed up. Now, whether this is just some knobs and things in the background that they can tune, and then eventually the AI could be something formidable to play against, is, you know, up for discussion. But I simply think that this is, you know, somehow like a mode that's somewhere between ground war and, you know, Warzone, and it's kind of like stuck in this no man's land of it doesn't really have its own identity. And so every match with this essentially, you know, at least for me, revolved in finding a place that was kind of like in the middle of where a bunch of AI would walk past. I would farm the AI for XP, and every once in a while my fire would attract a human enemy that would see a bunch of his AI fucking teammates die over there, and he'd come and investigate and either kill me or I'd get the drop on him and kill him. So again, not very enjoyable, and I understand that this is a game mode that would be extremely experimental for them. It's something that they haven't really tried in this format before, so sure, there's going to be some hiccups and things like that, but its current iteration, I think, you know, really doesn't work. Another point of frustration for me is once again the fact that skills-based matchmaking, SBMM, is something that we have to deal with in another Call of Duty release. It's for sure in this. And the issue with that, primarily, I don't have a problem with the fact that you are playing against people that are better matched to your skill. But the problem with this is that it opens up a side to the game where reverse boosting and easy lobbies and VPNs are something that we have to deal with. And this just creates a side of the game which I don't really enjoy, because these ways of dodging skill-based matchmaking become something that people are so hyper focused on and become such a talked about a point that you are always kind of like dodging this. You know, I don't like what it brings to the conversation. I don't mind the fact that it makes things more difficult, but I don't like the fact that when we live in a world where skill-based matchmaking exists, people constantly look for excuses as to why they are losing or why someone else is better. I'm sure everybody is just as tired as I am of the constant arguments about bot lobbies and easy lobbies and you reverse boosted and you did this and everything like that. I think that this game has grown enough in terms of a following, an audience, you know, just general as a franchise, that there really is no reason why we can't have ranked skill-based matchmaking playlists and unranked non-skill-based matchmaking playlist. As simple as that, period. That is a solution that we need here. Once we have that, it will split the player base accordingly, and it would quiet this whole thing down. At the very least, I believe so. I could be wrong. These conversations could still continue on, but at the very least, we should give it a try and we should see if that actually solves some of these issues. Two things which affect specifically the modes which we saw in this beta is the perk system, which I'm not really happy with the implementation that we have here right now. Of course, the current system basically works around the fact that a certain amount of time in the match will give you an upgraded perk, and then a certain additional amount of time and points, kills, aka whatever score on top of that after that would give you the ultimate version of that perk. Now, the problem with this is that this kind of like definitely creates a situation where you would always want to be in a match from the very beginning. In other words, it means that players who stack matches as groups together will always have an advantage, and it really discourages this whole like just sit down and jump into an open match and play, because of course if you join a match that's 1 minute, 2 minutes going on already, people will have that time advantage on you, and so therefore they'll already have all of the best perks, or at least the best perks for them specifically in their build ready to go, which will just cause frustration in new players that jump into the matches, meaning they will leave the matches, thereby creating uneven matches which allow you to find more of those matches to join. So it is a vicious cycle that essentially feeds into this. It causes frustration, and I don't really know if this is the best way for them to implement that. It's a weird decision that they went this way in the first place, because it just seems like something that wasn't tested enough and perhaps was extremely popular with a small group of people, but when you start bringing a wider audience into it, you would most likely get the kind of feedback like what I'm giving right now. Something else which also affects these modes and which is terrible is the spawning in. Generally speaking, there's like a 1 out of 3 chance when you spawn into a map after being killed that you will be within like 1 to 2 to possibly 3 seconds away from another player that is running at you full tilt with a loaded gun for bear and ready to kill you. It doesn't really work, and a lot of the times the spawns are extremely unpredictable in a very bad way. I understand that there should be a slight amount of randomization here, but when the game literally spawns you in between 2 full stacks of an enemy team, it doesn't make any sense, and I don't think it's intentional. It seems like this spawn system is not working the way that it's supposed to, so this is absolutely something that needs to be addressed, because this can of course be a huge problem in, let's say, the more sweatier, the more competitive modes, where people are actually really depending on getting a favorable spawn to get as much advantage as they can from coming back into a firefight. Now lastly, and I know I've been carrying on a lot, and Jesus Christ, it certainly seems that there's far less, good things about this game than there are bad. I mean, it is the nature of the beast. It's also the fact that we have a super low time to kill in this game as well, which means that combined with the low visibility that we currently have in this game, it kind of feels that in a lot of the times the person who shoots first dies first, which is like a weird situation, because generally the aggressor in combat, especially if you can land your shots, should be the one that wins the fight. But because of the low visibility in the game right now, and I understand that there could be, some sort of discussion around realism here. I mean, if you come walking into a room and there's a bunch of dead bodies lying there and you can't almost nearly immediately make out which one of them is an alive person while the rest are just bodies that are strewn around, yes, I understand that could be like a little bit more realistic, maybe. But the point is, realism should never trump gameplay or fun, and the losing gunfights like that because of the simple fact that you couldn't identify the enemy, identify the person. And this is up close. This situation gets far more fucking difficult when you actually walk into an open market or something like that, and somebody is coming in from the side and they're behind a plant or something like that. And literally, this is what I meant with somebody starting the fight dying first, is because in this case they could also be having a problem seeing you, and then this means that whoever shoots first in the general direction of what they're hearing is going to reveal their position. The other person is going to be able to turn on them and shoot. So I don't necessarily know what the solution is for this. I do like the fact that this game doesn't have like a giant fucking billboard above your head as you come around the corner, because I feel that that's also like too much in the other direction. So again, I'm not a game designer, so I would love to be able to come up with a super intuitive, very good, well thought out solution here. But the bottom line is, this is something that needs to be looked at, because it is I would say, a little bit leaning too much into the direction of stuff being very, very hard to see and very, very hard to identify. One good thing about this though is this was something that was also mentioned by a lot of players as we moved through the different beta phases. And this combined with the fact that some of the guns produced like an insane amount of fucking muzzle smoke when you shot and all of that. And again, you know, people saying, yeah, but that's realistic. It's fucking not. No gun looks like, you know, a blunderbuss. Modern day weapons look like a fucking blunderbuss when they shoot. Nonetheless, literally a burning fucking tire fire. But the point is that that was something that they've also addressed already during the beta weekend. So I believe that this is something that's on the periphery of the developers, and it's not the first time that they might have heard this. Maybe they needed the beta to just reaffirm some of these things and, you know, just to get players going like, yeah, dude, this really is a fucking problem. Now, I mean, getting through all of that, and as I said, I do apologize. It certainly does seem like there's far more negatives than there are positives. I do want to, however, end it off by saying that it's first of all impossible for me to say whether this would be a game that's worth your money or not. I think it is super subjective at that point, and especially looking at what you're getting from the game. If there's one particular mode that you're aiming for, perhaps the entry point, the price level is too high. However, if you're looking at this and you're going, I'm gonna be able to play single player, I'm gonna be able to play the DMZ mode, I'm gonna be able to play Spec Ops, I'm gonna be able to play all these side modes, I'm gonna be able to play whatever comes with Warzone, and if there's a plunder and all of that, it means that you have many different ways in which you can engage this package, and it means that you can enjoy it in whichever way you find there. That also being said, it means that we're stuck with this version of Call of Duty for the next 2 years, and so it means that there's a lot of opportunity here for the studio to improve this and to make changes to this and to change due to the things that we as players complain. So make your voices heard, obviously, you know, in a respectable manner, and get the point across that there are things which need work and that need to be done, and we as a group of people that enjoy this package will hopefully be able to steer it in the right direction. Nonetheless, I think this game is gonna make a fucking killing. People are already calling it the best Call of Duty ever made, alongside other people that are saying it's the worst Call of Duty ever made. That's also pretty much fucking bog standard for a Call of Duty game, and totally to be expected. But I would be lying if I said that I was not excited to jump into this at the end of the month when it comes out and start grinding that horrible fucking Gunsmith 2.0. That's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments down below the things that I missed, things that, you know, you really enjoyed that I didn't fucking mention, things that really bothered you that I didn't mention. But just in general, let me know whether you're going to be picking this up. We're going to wait for a little bit, see, you know, how it develops a month or two afterwards. Maybe wait until Warzone comes out and see how the reception of that is before you make your decision. But as always, vote with your wallet and vote with your time. That's it from me. It's just super important from my side that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.